You're listening to The CEOs, brought to you by the University of Alberta on the Corus Radio Network.
In 2002, Alberta Treasury Branch became ATB Financial. 5 short years later, an Alberta native returned home to lead the financial institution. I am pleased to welcome to the Corus Radio Network CEO Series, Dave Mowat, President and CEO of ATB Financial. Hello, Mr. Mowat.
Hi, Angela. It's great to be here.
Well, it is interesting to finally put a face to the voice I've been hearing so much on the radio. Very effective ad campaign, and I want to talk about that in a little bit. But first, I've got to find out about Dave Mowat. And if you have had a chance to listen in on any of our CEO series, we really do want to find out more about the person behind the title. Let's start with, what kind of a kid were you?
Oh, I was incredibly well behaved and listened to everything I was told.
Now be honest.
Actually, you could probably sum it all up on my, probably every single report card I ever got was, if Dave paid more attention in class, he would do better.
You know, that's really encouraging to the parents who are reading those report cards from their children saying, come on, can you just apply yourself? Look what happened with Mr. Mowat. All right, you were born in Calgary, but pretty much spent all your younger years in Sherwood Park.
Yeah, my dad worked for the Hudson's Bay Company, so he moved around a bit, and just after I was born, we moved up to Edmonton, so got to watch Klondike Days Praise from the corner window of the Hudson's Bay Company on Jasper Avenue.
What other kind of memories do you have of growing up in Sherwood Park?
You know, it's that was a time when Sherwood Park was in the sticks. Like, it was a long drive from Edmonton to Sherwood Park. Now there's no drive. It's just all city. And behind our house, there was nothing but alfalfa from there to Saskatchewan. So it was kind of a young community, lots of young families. Probably one of the first houses my parents owned, very modest, and we had a great time. I think I broke most of the windows in Our Lady of Perpetual Health playing hockey in the rink in the backyard of the school. But it was pretty close-knit, and I just met somebody, Bob Horton, the other day, who I grew up with as a kid. I haven't seen him in many, many, many years. So it was a good community.
Nice, tight-knit community. All right, I want to find out, in those early years, or maybe even as a teenager, was there someone who really stood out to you, who maybe inspired you or influenced you in some way?
You know, it's interesting. When you say that, I think of 2 bosses I've had, and incredibly different people. One guy's name was George Werka, and he was the miserable son of a gun. Tough, and kind of never had a real good word very often. But at the core of him was a very fair person. He didn't play favorites. He was mean to everybody. But there was a certain element where through all of that, if you ever did get a word of praise, you really savored it. But he also gave people opportunity. So as a young guy, I had my own crew, and that was unusual because I was just a young university student and things like that. So he gave you a chance. And I think, you know, even I see in some companies, even our own sometimes, I don't know, we get too scientific about things, I think. And so I think that idea of being fair, not playing favorites, and giving people a chance. And then I go to the other extreme as Dale Carter's a guy I worked for very early on, and I can remember, putting a loan together, and I sat him on the corner of his desk, and then I walked back and forth, and he still hadn't touched it. And a couple of days later, he hadn't touched it, and I finally said, what's going to be done here? And he said, Dave, I didn't get a chance to read it, so I just signed it. Here it is. And I went back and I checked it again and checked it again. But he was one of those guys that always tries to find the good in people and really built you up. And in that category, I have a mother-in-law as well, who I would say is probably my biggest cheerleader. Like, I think she even makes up stuff about me. But she was a high school teacher, and she was in that same ilk, too, of that finding people doing stuff right and really emphasizing it. And I think that sometimes those people get kind of passed off as fluffy or cheerleaders, and I think all the principals my mother-in-law had always thought she was too easy of a marker and kids were succeeding too easily. But, you know, if you look at that sentence again, the word succeeding is in there. And so many things we have these days is we're kind of picking fault in just about everything. And I think sometimes if we put our shoulder to stuff, we can create a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think leadership has lots of those same elements.
So do you find yourself taking those bits of those individuals into your own leadership style?
Absolutely. And I won't go through them, but I could list some people I've worked for in my life that I've learned a lot from, and they were pretty crummy bosses, you know, it's people. So I think I've always kind of seen it as something to learn from. And, you know, I won't be naive. You're unhappy if you got a poor boss, but you can sit there and watch things that, you know, it's just like growing up, like I'm never going to be like my dad on that point. And
you
so,
turn out to be like your dad in a lot of points.
Yeah, and all the good points, hopefully. And but you try and ignore some of the stuff that you weren't that happy with. And I think that's the same in leadership. You can learn from a tough situation. You know, banking, we have some of the very best banks in Canada. They're extremely well managed. They're safe. They're just have very good brands all across the country. And what they are is a national strategy, and they run a portfolio, and they do it extremely, extremely well. People ask me, you know, do you want to expand ATB outside the province? And my answer is a quick no, because if we expanded ATB, you know, to Vancouver, Toronto, or anywhere, you'd have a little challenge to explain how we'd be better than the TD or the Royal Bank or something, because you might lose your differentiation. Whereas here in Alberta, you know, you know, Bruce Edgelow runs our energy practice here in Alberta. Everybody knows Bruce, and there isn't a deal we don't see. And we got Wellington Holbrook, who runs our small business facilities, and everybody knows Wellington. And plus, you can really run a strategy based on people. And that isn't to say we're smarter than anybody else, and it isn't to say the other banks don't have great people, but we can slowly but surely high-grade the cookie jar and get exactly what we're looking for. And we can even say is, what are we looking for in Lloydminster or Castor or Calgary, and get exactly the right people.